Welcome to One Spark at a Time with me, Rabbi Adam Miller. A Jewish mystical legend tells that during creation, something broke and shattered, sending sparks of divine holiness around the world. It is our responsibility to do acts of tikkun olam to repair the world around us. Each time we do a good deed, we are gathering one more of those sparks and making our world a little more whole and holy. Today, we will meet an individual doing this sacred work of repairing the world one spark at a time. My guest today is Evan Traylor, a first-year rabbinical student at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. A graduate of the University of Kansas, Evan is the past national president of NFTY, the North American Federation of Temple Youth, the Reform Movement's national youth group. A member of the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable, Evan has served on the Hillel International Board of Directors and been a member of the URJ Board of Trustees. Evan, welcome to One Spark at a Time.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's really, we were talking a little bit before, it's so funny that we have lots of different paths, but this is the first time that we are meeting. So thanks for having me.
Indeed, I'm delighted to have you here as a future colleague, as someone with whom we definitely share a lot of common connections. We both have connections to Oklahoma. We both attended the University of Kansas. We both have relationships with URJ Green Family Camp in beautiful Bruceville, Texas. But let's start with, where are things for you right now? This is your first year at rabbinical school, and ordinarily you would be in Israel for the whole year. How has COVID-19 impacted those plans?
Yes. You know, when I applied to HUC back in the fall, things were moving along just as planned. Applied and interviewed and got accepted, and was starting to plan January, February this year, and coronavirus hit. And so yes, ordinarily I would be in Israel right now. I would just be finishing up my first full week in Israel at the Jerusalem campus. And because of coronavirus, the first year class for Hebrew Union College is online for this upcoming year. And we'll be able to go to Israel during our fourth year. So we will still have that Israel experience. But so I'm in Washington, D.C., and we'll be here for the next year. And we'll be taking classes online, and I totally am disappointed, and also you know, the idea of moving to Israel during coronavirus and having to navigate that in a foreign country just is also would have been challenging. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Quite a lot going on right now for you, and that's certainly, I can understand the challenge of wanting to be here, but I guess in a way it's a crash course in welcome to the rabbinate, that we adapt on the fly and adjust to things. It's one of the things I love about being a rabbi, is you never quite know what's coming up next. So there's a lot on the plate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you're on the path now to the rabbinate. When did you know that this would be your future?
So I grew up really connected to the Reform congregation in Oklahoma City. From the time that I was born, my family was always connected, and pretty much grew up there. And starting in high school is when I started going to Green Family Camp, our beloved camp in Texas, and also got involved with NFTY, the North American Federation of Temple Youth, the youth movement for the Reform movement. And it was really in high school that Judaism became something more than a safe place or a community. It became my place. It became a place where I could take ownership and create programs and build community with other teens. And I think that's when, starting in NFTY, when I started to have incredible Jewish mentors, rabbis, and other Jewish professionals who were guiding me along the way. That was when things started churning a little bit of like, oh, maybe this is something that I could be interested in. I will say at the University of Kansas, I was really involved with the Hillel there. And we have a remarkable Reform rabbi, Neil Schuster, who's at University of Kansas Hillel. And from the first week that I stepped on campus, Neil and I developed a great relationship that just had long conversations about big questions about Judaism, politics, everything going on in the world. And I think that relationship, as well as relationships with other rabbis in college, kind of solidified that a little bit more for me, of like, this could also, specifically the rabbinate, not just working in the Jewish world, could be a path to support people, to do the community building work that I and really passionate about, and also do the really important social justice work and guide our community through important moments. I will also say at University of Kansas, I studied political science and Jewish studies. So I was going a little bit back and forth of which path to choose, and ultimately landed in the Jewish space, just feeling really that it was the most genuine, most supportive space for me, and would be the path that would allow me to do the work that I was really, really invested in.
Well, you mentioned Rabbi Neil Schuster. It's another one of those small world pieces that Rabbi Schuster and I began rabbinical school together. So to have him wind up at Kansas and be the connecting piece that helped you get to the rabbinate just feels like one more reason that we should have already been having this conversation with each other. You mentioned the value of social justice and pursuing justice. How did that become so meaningful to you personally?
So again, growing up at the Temple B'nai Israel in Oklahoma City, for me, justice work was just it was baked into what Judaism was. So I remember in middle school and in high school, as I did my bar mitzvah project, and throughout high school, we would always be going to the food bank. We would always be going to infant crisis services. We would always be doing and thinking about the wider community. And so for me, that was just a core component of, yeah, we show up on Friday night, and yes, we show up to religious school, and we are also showing up in these other spaces. So for me, it was a really organic, just from experience, that justice work is rooted within what it means to be Jewish. And I think that continued throughout high school. When I was in NFTY, I had the opportunity to meet other Reform Jews from Oklahoma and Texas, but also all around North America. And when we got together, we would have these big conversations about what was happening in the world. And so to go to these events and to hear different perspectives, and to hear people struggling with a particular issue in their community, or they're thinking about an issue, the connection around justice just grew even more, because it became not about some policy that is often some article or out in government, but about my friends, about people that I'm in relationship with, and the challenges that they're having. And time and time again, I see that through my time at University of Kansas, and now over the last 4 years, a couple of years in New York City, a couple of years in Washington, D.C., that as I meet more people, as I hear more stories and more narratives from people, that you can't separate the policies or what's happening in our country or world from the people, that it is really rooted in the people and their experience.
The narrative piece is certainly an important element of this. And one of the most important roles we can play today is that of bearing witness, listening to the authentic stories of others. So I want you to share with us a little bit, 2 pieces from your narrative, talking to us about what it was like growing up as a person of color in Oklahoma, sharing that piece, but also separately from that, what it was like being a Jew of color.
I think that the best way to describe it is disorienting and in between, I think would be the best descriptors. So growing up in Oklahoma City, not a big Jewish population. My Temple B'nai Israel, probably growing up, had about maybe 300 families or so, which made it a really rich community, and a lot of families who had been there for multiple generations, and ultimately small. And so I grew up in elementary and middle school and high school, not only being the only Jewish student, one of the only Jewish students in my class, but in the entire school. And so I absolutely have memories of in first grade that the play that the first grade was going to do was a Christmas play. And just thinking back on it now, and my mom kind of went in and had a conversation with the principal and the teachers. And so on the one hand, being in that position where I was the only Jewish person that a lot of kids would come to meet. And so for me, took a very education approach. And so in high school, went to several churches and taught about Judaism and Jewish community and what that meant for me. So that was a kind of alienating and kind of in between experience of being different in one space. And then within the Jewish community that's in Oklahoma City that I would call tight-knit and really connected and really bound to one another. It was really, it was powerful to be connected with that community. And I remember even as early as 10, 11, 12, recognizing, oh, I'm one of the few people that looks like me in this community. And at that time, not really understanding what that meant, but can still remember those feelings of, oh, this just, like, I just feel different. It was that similar feeling of being the only Jewish kid in school, and being one of the few people of color in Jewish community. And I think that kind of continued throughout my time in Oklahoma City. One of the, I think, advantages of our community was that we were so close to each other. And so these horrible experiences that I've heard from other Jews of color all around our country, talking about going into a service on a Friday night or a Saturday morning and people being scared of them or thinking that they are the janitor or the babysitter or not there to be part of Jewish community. Right. I never experienced that in Oklahoma City, because when you show up on a Friday night, there's 40 or 50 people and 40 or 50 people there. Right. Everyone kind of is connected in that way. And so I think it really comes back to the relationship piece. And so I will say, even being part of that community, still recognizing from an early age that, oh, like one of few people of color, few people who kind of look like me in this space, and that having kind of a disorienting and kind of confusing effect.
As you got outside of the circle of your community there in Oklahoma, did that experience for you change within the Jewish world?
It shifted in different ways. Yeah. So throughout college and over the last few years, have just become much more aware. And I think this conversation is much bigger in the Jewish community around Jews of color, and not only making sure that they are accepted within community, but empowered within Jewish community, and are taking on leadership roles. But I will say, like, I still, anytime that I go to a new Jewish community, and over the last few years, I was working for the URJ and would travel a lot. So would go to different synagogues, would go to different Jewish spaces on campuses. And every time there's always something in the back of my head saying, okay, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And I think that is at the core of when we talk about building community, that we want people to be able to enter into community being their full selves. And if anybody has even the slightest hesitancy around, like, okay, am I going to be accepted here? Are they going to look at me funny? Are they going to think that I'm something else? We've already missed it. We've already missed it. And that hesitancy keeps people away. And it keeps our community from being able to do the important work that we want to do, to actually build community, to get to know one another, and to practice Judaism in really rich and meaningful ways. And so over the last few years, like, it has shifted in different ways. I've become much more confident and sure of myself and what I'm bringing to the Jewish community. And I think also that that hesitancy is still always in the back of my mind when I'm entering into a new space.
Thank you for sharing that, Evan. That's a very powerful piece. Hearing your personal narrative, how does that relate to what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, it's so I think in this moment, when we are hearing Black people cry that Black Lives Matter, which I think is like the very least that people could recognize, that like Black lives do indeed matter. I think it's important for our community to recognize that there are Black people in our Jewish community. It's not Jewish community and Black community, that there is a beautiful crossover of people who are holding both of these identities. And so I guess I would want our Jewish community to know that it's not one or the other. That when we say Black Lives Matter, like you are saying that my life matters. You're saying that Black Jews who are in your community, whether they are active in your congregation or not, that their lives matter and that they should be part of this community, that they should be part of this country and should be treated justly and equally. So I think that's like a really important piece of this moment of recognizing, and it goes back to relationship, but recognizing that that there are people at this, that it's not slogans and that it's not far out there policies everywhere, that there are real people behind all of these pieces.
Well, you certainly touched on a very important element of this, which is having those conversations. As you probably have already figured out, part of a rabbi's role includes helping people be comfortable with the uncomfortable. We live in a time where there are a lot of challenging conversations. How do you approach these difficult conversations with others who might be around you, people you know, or even people who you're just encountering in different settings?
Absolutely. I think it's all about intentionality. I think intentionality is like a key component. So there are some times where if we're at a protest and there's a counter protester, that is not the moment that you're going to change someone's mind or even have like a understanding conversation. Like that's not going to happen. I would also say oftentimes on Facebook or social media, like that is also not the space where, not necessarily, it could happen sometimes, but I have seen that it's really challenging to have those intentional conversations that really, I think, move past the slogans and move past the people's preconceived notions or ideas about things into a space that allows people to rethink and reassess what they are coming into the space with. So I think it takes time. I think it takes space. I also think we have to think in this moment about being intentional about who we are connecting with, who we're having conversation with, and what do we want the result to be? If we want the result to just be that I feel better about myself, explaining what I believe, which I think is really valid and important for people to develop that. I don't think that that's a conversation that's going to change someone else's mind necessarily, or is going to help both people evolve and grow. But if we approach a conversation with humility and the opportunity to hear where people are coming from, because there's stories behind everything. And I think when we give ourselves time and space to understand those stories, then we can start to reassess, and the things start to mix together, and you find commonalities and you find places where you really don't disagree. And I'm also mindful that if you have a conversation with someone, whether a family member, a friend, about something that they said, after 15, 20 minutes, you may just be in different places. And for that to be okay, and for you to reassess then, what does that mean for your relationship? So I don't think every conversation needs to be an end all be all. I don't think every conversation needs to be like trading lobs of believe in this, believe this. But for people to really think, like, do you want to grow in your relationship in this way by having this conversation? And if the answer is yes, take time, take some intentional space with that person. If the answer is no, that like really like maybe I'm not as invested in this relationship as I want to be, or in this way, then maybe to put it to the side and to try again later. But I think the time and space and the reflection are some of those key components.
You shared so many powerful teachings in there, Evan. I love the piece about, moving beyond just email and social media and actually having the direct interaction, but also the acceptance that not every conversation is going to end with both people walking away saying, yes, we're on the same side. And it's okay to say, you know what, we've made some progress. We're at a place, let's pause here and come back, because we just might not be in the same place. It's a very powerful element. And I want to we're going to intersperse questions from our audience throughout this, but one question that came up here, and it's something you and I had talked about ahead of time as well, is the question of, in these conversations, there's often language or terms that people get different reactions to, and they might be surprised by, or they might not understand the reaction. And one of those that came in from our audience, and it's one we talked about before, is the term "all lives matter." When someone uses that, how do you respond to them?
I think there's a couple of different pieces here. I think there are like a few different things that people are thinking about that I have found in my experience talking with people, that when people respond that, there are a few different things that they're thinking about. One is could be like a confusion around like, but wait, hold on. Why do we have to specify? I thought that we could be in this space where we can say this, that like all human beings, right? And it is connected with our Torah, and it is connected with the values that many people grow up. So why do we have to specify? And for people who are approaching the conversation from that lens, what I have come to find myself saying is that that's the goal, right? That is the goal. And in this moment, we're not there. And so if we want all lives to matter, then Black lives need to matter. And that's the work that we need to do. That's the repair work, the justice work that we need to do. I think that I've also had conversations with people who, and because again, we are in a society that values kind of lobbing things toward each other and talking past each other. But I have also found that like people respond with all lives matter without good intentions, and without like a clarity and a truth behind it of it's a like throw it back in your face kind of thing. Well, all lives are supposed to matter. But wait, you're in this moment not choosing to wear a mask outside, right? Like in this moment, you are also advocating for kids to be separated from their families at the border, right? Like there are also like all these other pieces that kind of demonstrate that, okay, it's not really that that you kind of have this like truth or a confusion in this moment. It's kind of it's a like throwing it back in your face. And so for like that is like the hardest, because there's not really like a conversation there. Like that is like I just want to rebut real quick so I can leave. But I would say for the people, and I think that that's like a small group of people. I would say for the people that are kind of like confused or like trying to grapple with the language of the moment, that like that our goal is to get there. Our goal is to be a place where every single person matters. And in order to do that, right now, we have to say that Black lives matter, because the policies in this moment and for centuries have not matched that goal.
I find that to be a very powerful and beautiful answer. Thank you, Evan, for getting into all the different elements of that. I want to return for a moment back to something you said earlier about being in conversation and engaging with different people and knowing who our partners are and what we know about them. One topic here is intersectionality. And for those in our audience who are unfamiliar with the term, it's the idea that the suffering of different groups of people can be related and connected to each other. That concept is part of what brings anti-Israel sentiments into the conversation about racial justice or other forms of justice work or social justice work. So a two-part question for you, very rabbinic style. Part one, life on campus is a topic that comes up often. Having been a student not long ago at the University of Kansas, did you see this anti-Israel threat to Jewish life, experience it there at that campus, or have you seen it at other campuses, and do you see it as a threat? And the second piece of this is, how do you deal with the anti-Israel sentiment among those who are identifying with the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, two-part, and like this could be our whole conversation.
Indeed.
So a few different pieces. So at University of Kansas, I think overall, I would find it not a very activist heavy campus across the board. Definitely while I was there, and especially I was there from 2012 to 2016, so at the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so definitely saw activism in that. We did not experience anti-Semitic or anti-Israel activism at Kansas. And from the last few years working for URJ and supporting college students, it's a challenge on campus. And I think that the biggest challenge for us in this moment is to think about those moments where in any type of activism that it turns into anti-Semitism, right? So in the moment that you could be protesting Israel, and there are a lot of Jews who would also be part of protesting policies from the Israeli government, that the moment that it spills into, well, the Jews control XYZ, that's usually not a good phrase to use at all, or the Jews are about this, or assuming that just because someone is Jewish that they have an unwavering, undying support for Israel, when it turns into that anti-Semitism, that's where it becomes really scary and dangerous for Jewish students on campus. I think one of the other challenges is that growing up, a lot of students might not have a strong connection to Israel or any type of relationship with Israel. If they didn't go to Israel on a trip in high school, or their family hasn't been. And so to get on campus and to have this very disorienting effect of, okay, I've never been to Israel. I don't know anyone in Israel. Why do people think that I love Israel with all my heart? Like, what's going on with this? And this very just strange anti-Semitic experience for students on campus. So I think that is the challenge, and that's the thing that we have to watch for. I think the most effective ways around combating that, some are absolutely done with horrible intentions and are intentionally anti-Semitic, and some are done out of ignorance. And I would say, I would flip it with our Jewish community, that there are a lot of white Jews who would say racist things, not because they are racist or because they were raised a certain way, but because they're ignorant about the impact of those words or those actions on people of color. And so I think it is our responsibility to keep showing up for Black Lives Matter, for people of color, as a way to build conversation and education around anti-Semitism. I've been really inspired, not just in this moment, but over the last however many years, of Black activists who have done the work to educate white people about racism and the effects of racism. And I would love for our Jewish community to also take that up and to say, we want to be in coalition with you. Here are some things that are really challenging, right? When this comparison comes up or this statement comes up, this is really challenging for our Jewish people and is anti-Semitic. But that doesn't mean we're going to leave. We're not going anywhere. We're here. But let's work together to kind of to address this.
So staying in the conversation is an important element of how you approach this.
Yes, absolutely. We have to be in the conversation, because if we're not in the conversation, other people come to speak for us and say, actually, the Jews believe this. When I think that we are part of this coalition, and we need to be part of this coalition. I'll give a quick shout out for an incredible book, Black Power, Jewish Politics, by Professor Mark Dollinger, who's out at San Francisco State. And it came out a couple of years ago. And in it, he kind of details, this is the work of the civil rights movement, so 50s, 60s, 70s. And he details how Jewish community leaders were having some of the same challenges that we are having right now. They were taking note and saying, oh, we're actually seeing some anti-Semitism come up, some anti-Semitic statements come up in, in a number of the Black Power movement organizations. we need to stay connected. We need to stay in coalition, and we don't want to squash their momentum. But let's just take note of that. Like, let's watch this and let's stay in connection with them. So there's a history of this, that we can stay in coalition, that we can stay connected to one another, while still moving us all forward toward liberation. Because if we're going to fight racism, that also includes fighting anti-Semitism and sexism and transphobia and all of these different things being connected.
So on this very topic, one of our audience members wrote in asking, what was your reaction to seeing the back and forth happening in the NFL with DeSean Jackson, and also with, they didn't give the name, but there's a Pittsburgh Steeler who actually came out and spoke about his relationship to the Jewish community. When you see these things, what was your reaction? Where do we think we are based on these kinds of interactions? Absolutely.
And it's this interaction, and it's countless other examples. Actually, something that I found really powerful was that there was at least one Jewish NFL player who also came out and made a statement and said, like, this is, again, bringing it to the relationship, bringing it to the personal, like, when you say this, it is making me feel this way, right? As a fellow NFL player, right? Like, we've been in locker rooms together, we've been on the field against one another, right? Like, it is making me feel this way. And I will say to DeSean Jackson, but I think to others, that when we talk about teshuvah, of returning, of repairing, that first we have to say, like, hey, I'm sorry, and this is why this was wrong, right? Like, that piece of it. And I saw that from him, and I've seen that from others. And then what is the work that has to be done to repair the harm that was done from the statement or from the action? And then I feel like this is the third piece that a lot of people leave out, a coming back in, right? That once there has been acknowledgement, and once repair work has been done, there has to be the opportunity to come back in and to say, you know what, okay, great, like, let's keep working together. So I think it comes back to relationship. I think it also comes back to what is that process to say that we are all going to mess up sometimes, and there has to be a process that we can look to move forward, so that we're not just, okay, you're out, sorry, like, can't support you anymore, can't do this anymore, that there's not that opportunity.
So it sounds like you're rejecting some of the cancel culture approach that we've gotten to as a society.
I think permanent cancel. Yeah. I do believe in, if someone is in a position of power, and they are doing something wrong, they need to be removed from that position of power, because they don't have credibility with the people that they're supposed to be leading, or whether it's an author, a leader in government, whoever, they don't have any credibility, and they need to be removed from that position to reduce the harm to people and to stop the harm from people. I think oftentimes when we bring up cancel culture, there often hasn't been some of those steps that I just talked about. Like, there oftentimes is not an acknowledgement from the person about the harm that they have done. There's oftentimes not an apology or an acknowledgement. And then there's also oftentimes not a process that they go to repair the harm that they have done either. And so I just think that when those two pieces are actually completed and actually done, that there should be an opportunity to come back in. I'm thinking about different celebrities or different people in the news. I think oftentimes there hasn't been that apology, acknowledgement, or the repair work done. And so I think without that, like, it is hard to say, like, okay, you've had a year or two off, like, come back in. I don't like, because without the repair work being done, I think we'll see similar behavior and similar patterns.
As you said, true teshuvah involves acknowledging that we've gone off the path, and then beginning the process of working to get back and getting back in. You need to acknowledge where you are before you can ever change and begin that process of being reaccepted. I think that's a great response to teshuvah, to the cancel culture element. of what's going on right now. Let's look at the big picture. It's been 55 years since Dr. King shared his famous dream. Where do you feel that we stand right now as a nation with regard to racial justice?
Oh, 55 years. Wow. This moment that we've been in for the last 6 weeks is different than past moments. I said I was at University of Kansas, which is 4 hours away from St. Louis when Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. I was actually spending a semester in DC when Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore. Like this moment is different, and it is built on the activism from the last 6 years and from decades and centuries of Black activism. This moment is different, and I am hopeful and worried that we're going to miss this moment, because we have seen incredible changes. We've seen changes in the Minneapolis Police Department, from cities all across the country in terms of police reform. We have seen a real, I think, like awakening from a lot of people, a lot of white people who in the past maybe were like, yes, like this is important, but who are now showing up to protests, who are calling their representatives, who are educating themselves and educating their parents and grandparents and friends. And like this moment is different. People are showing up different in this moment. And yet I'm still fearful that even with all of this work, that there's still a hesitancy to move forward boldly. I think in this moment, this is the moment to move forward boldly. And I think there's still a hesitancy around that, and still a wishing of we should take it slowly and take it incrementally. And I just think in this moment that we have the power. The people who are wanting justice have power to make change. And so we've come a long way over the last however many decades and centuries, and yet like there's still so much work to do. And I just I hope in this moment that that everyone takes up their part in saying like this is the moment to move things forward.
So Evan, you know that we live in a polarized world where distinctions between moral values and politics feel blurred and entangled. As part of this, unfortunately, social justice even has become a code word for some particular political agenda by some. Talk about, if we are going to get to that better place, if we are going to really take advantage of this moment, the importance of community organizing to get us to create change and pursue justice in a way that's collaborative and not divisive.
Absolutely. Have I said relationships enough during our time together? I'll keep going back to it.
Rabbi Jonah Pesner would be very proud. Yes, the relationships have come up many times.
The relationships, absolutely. One example that I think speaks to this really powerfully is 2 years ago in Florida, there was Amendment 4 to restore voting rights to people who were formerly convicted with felony charges, and restored to more than 1 million Floridians. 1 million people would now be able to vote. And the coalition that came around, including a strong showing from the Jewish community, the coalition that was built across all these different lines of faith and race and all these different backgrounds. And what I'm reminded about is that in that fight, as it is with so many different policies, Black people and people of color are disproportionately affected by that, by that rule in Florida, by healthcare policies all over this country, by voting policies everywhere, disproportionately affected. And if we look at the just number of people, the majority of people that it's going to help are white people. And so we also have to think about this, that yes, we need to be addressing this because of the way that for this particular voting law was implemented racistly. And we have to look and be clear about the effects and the how these policies were put into place, and that this affects all of us. That if we are able to build relationships and understand that, okay, this affects my neighbor down the street, this affects the person that I get coffee from every single day, this affects X, Y, and Z, who my cousin twice removed is married to this person, and it matters to them, but I know them because we spent Thanksgiving together, right? Like those are those opportunities for us to see one another beyond the policies, and to see the effect that the policies are having. So I think that's like just a really important piece. And we are talking as rabbi and aspiring rabbi right now. I just think there's so much in our Torah that that speaks to humanity, that I think that we should be able to speak about people being able to get healthcare, people being able to vote in a democracy, people being able to drive down the street and not have police officers pull them over because of what they look like. Like there are some of these things that I think like our Torah just is like crying out to us and saying like read this, because I think it would say that no, like we can't have these policies that go against this. And so I think on a certain level, if we're to understand our religious tradition and our humanity, that we would be able to see beyond the partisan and to say, you know what, like this is what we need to do. And we can have the conversation about, okay, is it this plan or this plan? And how is it implemented? And what's the timeline and the money? But I think before we even get there, we have to line up behind some of these big ideals that say that each person is a world, is so valuable that they are a world. And what are we going to do to protect them and make sure that they are able to thrive?
Evan, we have so many things I would love for us to explore. I also know that time is limited for us. Speaking, as you said, as a Rav and an Erev Rav, as one who is a rabbi and one on the path to the rabbinate, one of your favorite quotes that you shared is from one of my teachers in rabbinical school, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. Entrances to holiness are everywhere, and the possibility of ascent is all the time, even on unlikely times and through unlikely places. There's no place on earth without the presence. We're talking about all of these challenges that we see, all these obstacles that are there, and where we go from here. But let's look deeper. Where have you encountered holiness in an unexpected place?
Yeah. Holiness, I think, can be found everywhere. And it's been about a year now since I started an intentional meditative practice. And just the act of slowing down and noticing can be just the most powerful. So to slow down and notice that when I walk into the pizza place around the corner, and I'm in a rush and I really just want my pizza and I'm hungry and all this stuff, that when I walk in, that the person there knows my name. And just how miraculous is that? That there are dozens, if not hundreds of people that walk into this pizza place every day or every week, and this person knows my name. And I know theirs. And that can be a miraculous moment. That there can be when someone is walking down the street and to see a parent high five their kid, or to see a dog playing, that there are some of those just like everyday moments. And then there are the huge moments of hundreds of people, even in a pandemic, gathering socially distant to speak truth, and to say that we as a community and a country deserve better, and we want to keep fighting for that, and we're fighting for everyone. And to take note of all the different signs, I think is just so important. So I would say if anyone is kind of looking for some of those everyday moments, They only happen when you slow down. They only happen when you slow down and can really just take a breath and can think about how many things had to happen for me to be right here in this moment. So that's kind of where I'm getting everyday holiness and trying to search it. And there are days when I need it more than others, but always searching.
Thank you for giving us that piece of hope and of blessing there as we think about all these things. I want to ask you a final question as we wrap up our conversation. There's been such a delight to be with you, Evan. Your path has taken you working toward a world that is more just and more holy in every way. What would you say to others who haven't yet taken that first step, but see that the world is a little broken around them?
I would say I often find myself in that space as well. I often find myself struggling with what is this thing? Do I go to this thing? Do I write this thing? There's just so many possibilities. And I think the biggest thing is to get out of our own heads. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to help somebody else. So if it is reaching out to somebody who could use a little bit more support right now. And I will say over the last 6 weeks or so, I've had so many friends and colleagues who have reached out just to say, hey, I'm thinking about you right now. And I hope that you're getting some strength and I hope that you're getting some rest. So to think about who are those people that could use a little bit more fortitude right now? Who are the people that would really benefit from some type of wide-ranging conversation about some of the big issues that are happening right now? And of course, show up to something. If there's a vigil happening, if there's a protest happening, of course, be safe and stay physically distant from people. But the best thing to do right now is to do something. And try not to think too much about it, but to say, you know what, I'm going to do this one thing and reflect on it and see how it feels. But the best thing to do right now is to do something.
Do something. A beautiful message for us to end with. Thank you, Evan, for taking the time to join me and sharing your passion and pursuit of justice in that theme of do something, of go out and make a difference. Each time that we have one of our One Spark sessions, we also remind ourselves that this time of COVID-19 has given us awareness of the blessings we have, as well as a heightened sensitivity to those who are in need around us. So we try to highlight different volunteer opportunities. We have a teen mitzvah corps this summer who are doing some great work. And one of the organizations they're working with is Meals of Hope. We've had the founder here on One Spark before. They need more and more volunteers to be there packing food. Food insecurity is a major concern throughout our Southwest Florida community. So if you have the time to volunteer with Meals of Hope or with the Harry Chapin Food Bank or with Grace Place, any of these organizations that are providing meals to those who are in need across Collier and Lee County, we encourage you to do so. You can contact them through their websites and find out the volunteer opportunities, all of which are handled in safe formats for social distancing, given this time that we are in. I want to thank all those who are in our audience for watching and listening to One Spark at a Time with me, Rabbi Adam Miller. If you missed any part of our experience today or want to watch other episodes, the full video will be available through the Temple Shalom of Naples YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to the One Spark at a Time podcast available on your favorite podcast provider. Friends, as we depart, I want to share with you this teaching from Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world. May you be inspired to embrace that teaching and to know that you too have the power to fix our broken world, one spark at a time.